And amid speculation that those North Korean troops may have some role regarding the war in Ukraine, let's cross to Kyiv and correspondent Gulliver Cragg. Gulliver, what reactions where you are?
Well, Ukrainian military intelligence has been saying for several weeks that North Korea was going to send troops. They put the number at 12,000, the total that are going to be sent. They believe that they're going to be used for the defense of Kursk region in Russia, or for Russia's counteroffensive there to try to kick out the Ukrainian army, which has occupied a small part of that region. South Korean intelligence seems to be saying that at least 10,000 troops could be sent as well. I think it's gratifying for the Ukrainians to see that their intelligence is apparently so far being proved right, and now the United States is also confirming at the very least that these men have been sent to Russia for training. What Ukraine is really worried about, and what has already been affecting Ukraine's defences in a very negative way, is North Korean military support for Russia in terms of armaments. More than 1 million shells, by some accounts, have already been sent, and also some quite sophisticated missiles. Even the less sophisticated stuff, some of which has proven to be defective by its sheer quantity, is making a very, very big impact on the ground. The more sophisticated missiles are an alarming sign that the North Korean regime is actually capable of making, modern technology. At least one of them was proven by Ukrainian researchers to have some Western-made components, showing that they're also getting around the sanctions. All of that is very worrying and making a difference on the battlefield. The soldiers, even if there's 12,000 of them, won't make that much of a difference on the battlefield. And they do allow Ukraine to draw attention to this problem and also argue that the escalation that Ukraine's Western allies are sometimes voicing such strong concerns about trying to avoid is actually coming from their opponent's side, from the Russians, from Russia and its allies. It allows them, yes, to say that this is what we really need to be looking out for in terms of escalation. And we've already heard condemnation coming from Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, and Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Secretary, saying that this is very, very serious. He said, I think, if they are deployed alongside Russia in Ukraine, technically at the moment, no one's predicting that. They're predicting that they're going to be deployed in Russia to help Russia with its counteroffensive in Kursk region, but that's obviously still part of the same war.
Yeah, and we've had South Korea certainly paying attention. They say if the North Koreans send troops, will be escalating as well.
Yes, they've already, according, I think, just to South Korean media cited by Newsweek, said that they're already thinking about increasing their military support to Ukraine. Of course, the Ukrainians would welcome that, even though Volodymyr Zelensky has said it's very worrying if this starts turning into a world war. On the one hand, he is using this development in his rhetoric to warn about a world war. On the other hand, he's certainly not going to refuse South Korean assistance. I've seen some rather excited Ukrainian media headlines saying South Korea to send troops to Ukraine. That's not exactly what they said, but they did say that they might send military personnel in an auxiliary capacity to help the Ukrainians, in particular with translating if they take any of these North Korean soldiers captive.
Gulliver Cragg, while we speculate over what North Korea is going to do, there's the reality of what is actually happening in eastern Ukraine. Russia continuing to make incremental gains on the eastern front from where you are. And we're seeing the displaced still having to move out in greater numbers.
Yes, I mean, I think we see a lot of reports about people being evacuated, particularly from Donbass, but also from areas of southern and northern Ukraine. And then what happens to them afterwards? Of course, there are very many different stories. Some people leave the country completely. Others find jobs, or they have places to stay, friends, relatives elsewhere in Ukraine, and start new lives there. But there are those who are simply unable to do that, particularly, of course, the elderly. And a lot of the people living in those areas in Donbass are elderly. They're pensioners. This morning, I met some of them in the far west of Ukraine, in Kovel. They'd been evacuated from various different places, but they all told a very similar story. They were absolutely unable to find any work, some of them physically unable to work anyway because they were too old. They're living off their pensions, which come to the equivalent of 67 euros per month, plus some state support that comes to about 40 euros per month. I met them at a charity that's set up by evangelist Christians, giving them additional food aid, which they all said they very, very much needed, because obviously the amount of money that they're getting is barely even enough to pay the rent, which takes up normally more than half of that income that I just described. So they're really, living in very, very, very difficult hand-to-mouth conditions, some of these people, and for months and months on end, and obviously with no prospect of being able to return home anytime soon if their home is still intact.
Many thanks for that. Gulliver Cragg reporting live from Kyiv.